Before we start the podcast, I'd just like to let you know that we've recently released Panglot Indonesian. This is an app on Android and iOS for learning the Indonesian language, or Bahasa Indonesia. If you're interested in learning this language using a novel and effective pedagogy, I suggest you check it out. Hello and welcome to Panglot World Languages, the podcast where we talk about languages from around the world. Today, our guest is Dr Mashrur Imtiaz, who is an assistant professor in the linguistics department at the University of Dhaka in Bangladesh. Dr Mashrur Imtiaz is the documenter, or a person who has documented the language of Kol, which is from northwestern Bangladesh. So we will be speaking about Kol today. I'm very excited and great to see you, Mashrur. It's been a little while since we last spoke.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me in this podcast. And hello, everyone. I'm Mashrur Imtiaz, and I'm really glad to be here. I work on language research and documentation of languages in Bangladesh, with a particular interest in lesser described languages and writing practices. I'm excited to be here and share some thoughts and experiences with you today. Looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Did you say writing practices as well?
A bit.
Okay. We should talk about the endangered alphabets project. Well, maybe one day we should talk about Silheti or something. But yeah, because that's another Bangladeshi language worth discussing. So yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to ask about is just, what makes you particularly special as a guest here is that your experience of language documentation. We have had one other guest so far who has worked on some documentation, but it's like adding documentation to an already documented language. But you, as I understand, started from zero and Kol was an undocumented language completely, and you went through this documentation process. It's really interesting, to hear about that. Maybe that's what I really want to get into in the heart of this. I think that's the most fascinating, how you go about that process. But maybe first, before we do that, let's talk a little bit about the basics of Kol. So what kind of language is it? How many speakers does it have? And where is it spoken?
All right. So, Kol is a language that is spoken in the northern western part of Bangladesh. There's a district, it's a sub-segment of the divisional practice. In Rajshahi and Chapai-Nawabganj, there are only two districts where Kol people reside, and the number of Kol people are less than 3,000. But there's only one entire village, which is known as Babudang. The Babudang village has only Kon speakers. So on that note, the language Kol is quite consolidated, because in their village area, in their community region, they often use their Kol language, but the number is gradually declining because apart from their very own community, they don't have much exposure to talk in their own mother tongue. So as per language use within the community, Kol is a bit stable, but from other aspects of language use, Kol is at a really vulnerable stage right now. And to talk about the language scenario and language characteristics, it's a Munda language, which is a major sub-branch of Austroasiatic language. It has close affinity with languages like Santali, Mundari, Koda, Kora, and some few more other sister languages. Apart from Bangladesh, there are many sister languages in India, but the Indian variants and the Bangladeshi variants, they have some specific grammatical feature which is not available in all the linguistic dialects or variants, whatever I say. So yes, as of now, the language term Kol only exists in Bangladesh, and in Indian, there are some people who are known as Ho or Larka Kol, but predominantly they are termed as Ho language. So if we want to label the term Kol, it exclusively goes on to the Bangladeshi speakers of the Kol community and their language itself. So that's the backstory of the language.
Right. So 3,000 speakers. So let's get a bit of context about Bangladesh as a whole. Could you tell us a bit about how many languages there are in Bangladesh?
Yes. So Bangladesh has unofficially 45 plus languages, and the range is in between 45 to 50. But unfortunately, most of the people in Bangladesh, they're not very familiar with all other languages. Apart from Bangla, people are very much familiar with 4 to 5 languages, but they are not really aware. They don't even know about there are so many languages present in Bangladesh right now.
Yeah.
So in Bangladesh, we have languages from all the major language families. From Indo-European, we have Bangla, Chakma, From Sino-Tibetan, we have Marma, Mro, Kumi, Kiang, Lushai, Bom. From Austroasiatic, we have Santali, Kol, Koda, Kora. From Dravidian language group, we have Kuruk. Yeah,
Dravidian as well. Okay.
yes. There's only one language from Dravidian subgroup, which is Kuruk, that is also present. And apart from that, there are some jargons, like there are some tea gardens in Bangladesh, and many indigenous communities work in these tea gardens, and they have created a pigeonized version of their all the languages. With all the mixture of their languages, they have created own pigeonized version that is called Bagani language. There are some tea garden language. So on a whole, these 40 to 45 languages, among these languages, almost 15 languages are endangered as per the EGIDS skill. That means they have speakers less than 3,000. And um, as of now, only 5 languages have educational system as per the government textbook. Apart from that, they don't have any access to textbook. They don't have any educational material. They don't have digital presence. So this is the present scenario. And I came to know about all this present scenario when I was working as a research associate in the first ethno-linguistic survey of Bangladesh under the education ministry, which was stand from 2014 to 2016. And from that part, I came to know that, okay, there are almost 50 languages in Bangladesh, and those are mostly under-described. And we have a very extensive open field to work on these languages. We need to work on them. We need to document them. This is what first hits in my mind, and I got interested in language documentation due to the like totally endangered language situation in Bangladesh, mostly the indigenous languages of Bangladesh.
So how many languages in Bangladesh are not documented? Or how many are documented, let's say?
Well, the answer is it's vaguely there are 4 to 5 PhD works on different indigenous languages. Apart from that, we can say most of the languages are undocumented.
Okay, so there's a lot more documentation to do.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Also, the languages which are documented, as I'm saying, they also don't have any large scale corpus. Basically, they have the PhD dissertation of the linguists, those who have worked on those language, a bit minor dictionary and all that. But as a whole, on a critical level, they don't have any documentation. So yes, this is it.
So I just want to briefly explain for the audience some people. I don't expect all people in the audience to know all of the. Some people will know all of this, but some people won't know all these terms. So just to explain, a corpus is a collection, essentially like a big collection of text. Sometimes they can be audio recordings as well, but basically a collection of the language. It's like a data set, but for the language. And the reason why that's important, well, there's lots of reasons why that's important, but essentially, if you don't have that, 'cause that's one side of documentation, essentially. The other side, we'll talk about briefly, but in brief, it's a description of the grammar plus usually at least some form of dictionary. Because otherwise, it means this language exists in people's minds, but it doesn't exist in any way that, if somebody says, okay, how do you say hello in this language? Like nobody knows, right? You'd have to go to their village and ask them to know the answer, right? So this is kind of what documentation is. It's like writing down what that language actually is in the first place. It's a very basic level of research. So that's just as a quick, in case people don't know about language documentation in the very high level sense. But of course, you've experienced this, so there's a lot to ask you about this process. So okay, so you start off with Kol. I'm interested to know why you chose Kol. Was it something that basically was there like a list of languages and someone just said you take this one, or was there some kind of specific experience that made you say I want to do this one? Like, how come you ended up with Kol rather than in any other language?
Well, there's a story about that. So I was not sure about which language I would work on. So in my primary field test, I chose 3 languages. One is from Chittagong Hill Tracts, which is the hill sides of Bangladesh, and most of the Sino-Tibetan languages reside there. and rest two others were Kharia and this Kol. So when I went to Chattogram or Chittagong hill tracts, I came to know that the Lushai people, they have migrated, and apart from that, there are very few Lushai speakers in Bangladesh, but there are other relevant sister languages they're residing in India. And right after the pilot fieldwork of the Kharia language, extensive grammar on Kharia got published from other publication. There's some online presence of those languages, but I didn't find any single piece or any work on coal,
So it
though
was like completely blank. It was like this language has
it
nothing, so
was
that's where you want to
almost
start.
forgotten. Right. Even I will
Yeah.
tell you a story about the name of coal. So that's one point. And second thing is that we in Bangladesh we have a predominant thought. Whenever we talk about indigenous language, we think that okay, these are the languages from the hillside. But there's a large segment of indigenous communities who are living on the plainland, mostly on the northern part. So their stories are being unheard. So I thought, okay, fine. Two or three previous works have been conducted in the Chittagong hill tracts. So I wanted to shed the light on the plainland, and I thought that, okay, fine, let's work on the indigenous community who were living in the plainland area. So that's another motivation. And thirdly, if we classify the words of Bangla, Bangla is the major language in Bangladesh, we see five major segmented words. And there a common understanding that Bangla is derived from the ancient Sanskrit language. But there's a word segment which we call the Desi words. All Desi words are coming from this Austroasiatic. So that also triggered my mind. Okay, let's get back to my root and let's dig it out again.
Mm.
Because you know what? If this is visible, how do we count the European counting system? It's finger based counting, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Hmm.
6, 7, 9, 10. We count
Yeah.
like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Uh,
6, 7, 8.
yeah.
So in our one hand, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 20 based counting system. So
Yeah.
that
So
counting
just to,
system,
sorry to interrupt, but some people will be taking this in by video, by audio. So for those listening by audio, it's a difference between using your fingers to count and using the wrinkles inside your finger,
right,
like
right.
the
All
knuckles
our
basically to
fingers
count.
have four wrinkles. So
Yeah.
we count on the basis of wrinkles. So each finger have four wrinkles. So
Yeah.
when we are counting with five fingers, we have 5x4. That is 20 counting
Yeah.
just at a time. And the Kol, Mundari, and these languages, they have a specific word, the word 20. They
Mm.
say it Kuri. And Bangla has also adopted that specific term Kuri. So
Mm.
20 based counting system that is also derived from this community.
Oh,
So
right. So
this
from
background
Col,
story,
so this is literally currently a 3,000 speaker language, which has had
right?
a big enough influence on the major language of Bangladesh to loan
Exactly.
a number. Numbers are
Right.
like a very core vocabulary, that's
Right.
quite amazing.
Even we use the word Kuri as a counting system. Ek Kuri, Dui Kuri, that means 20, double 20, triple 20.
To mean
So that
40 and
counting,
60. Yeah.
right, exactly. So that counting system, this is entirely this Austroasiatic language based, and Bangla has adopted this. So all these stories, all this connectivity really triggered my mind, and I thought, okay, let's work on coal, and this is how it started.
So there's a lot of reasons there. Interesting, you mentioned Sanskrit because literally before this recording, the previous recording was about Sanskrit. So there will so there were people who hear lots about Sanskrit, and then the next thing is this language originally derives from Sanskrit. I mean
Yeah.
Bangla does, and then Kol is
Yeah.
separate. So yeah. So you decided to go with Kol because of these reasons. I mean, it's interesting what you say about the plains and the hills, because in Taiwan, where I have a little bit more
Mhm.
knowledge about the local languages, they also have this distinction, and it's not entirely geographically correct because really, when they say someone is a plains tribe or a plains language, it's actually a reference to the border of the Qing Empire. So the Chinese Empire at a certain period in history, because the Chinese never conquered the whole of Taiwan. Like they conquered
Mm.
like kind of roughly half of it, and then the Japanese took over the whole of it later. Anyway, historical thing. But like when they had this border of like what was inside the Chinese Empire, it was mostly the plains. but also some of the mountains, and some of the plains was not in the empire. So it's like when they say a plains language, what they really mean is like a language from the people who are inside the empire.
Mhm.
And that means some people from the mountains are called plains languages, and some people from the plains are called mountain. Yeah, it's because, yeah, yeah. So there's a funny thing where there's this, this distinction. And I feel like when you say that most people thought that, indigenous people are just from the hills, but there's actually plains people, but they forget about them. It's a little bit like in Taiwan. Most people think, oh, the actual speakers of the languages of the mountain ones and the plain ones are all. So they used to have actually like a disparaging, like an offensive term for the indigenous people in Taiwan. They used to say, it's in Chinese, but they used to call them fan, which is kind of like barbarian. So they would say that the ones in the mountains are the raw barbarians, and the ones in the plains are the cooked barbarians, because they've been cooked by the Chinese culture, right? And it means they don't speak their language anymore. It's basically, sometimes people have this stereotype and they think that a certain geography is the only place a person can be, and they kind of miss the other part because they don't have this finer understanding of the reality of the place. I just wanted to make a link to another language there. But yeah, so you have these various reasons for being interested in coal. So you chose coal. So when you started, what was the first step for you to, did you have to contact the people first, or was there anything you had to do before that?
When I started working on coal at the very beginning, I didn't go for the main village. Rather, I started with the periphery level. I wanted to look at the coal people who were living outside the village, who were living at the fringe. So I went to their village, and mostly those are Santali people oriented area. And I found that they're mixing their coal languages with Santali people. So what I had to do, I had to meet with the coal people, and there was this headman. So I had to explain my research intention. Then they took a while to accept me as a researcher. Then I got into their village and started working. But I came to know that the real coal language I'm looking into, it's not there. There are lots of code switching and mixing along with Santali language. And there's another issue I'd like to share. See, there are lots of non-government organization, development organization. So they often work with these people, not with language, their lifestyle, their habitat, their financial aid. So they have this preconception that whenever some people are coming from outside, they're trying to work with them, there are some monetary function, there are some financial connectivity along with the research. So I had to explain that, okay, this is a pure linguistic and academic research, and we will try to work on your language grammar, your oral history, and all that. So that's the challenge I had to face when I started working. So that's one part. So after working with them for a while, when I realized that, okay, this language has been mixed up with Santali language, then I went back to the central village in Chapainawganj Babudiang. Luckily, I got a person from the Kul community who is quite educated and who is also enthusiastic about his language. He writes in Kul, he's
An
translating,
activist,
but
like an activist.
he's not familiar with the term activist, but basically he's a language activist.
Yeah, yeah,
He was doing all this activism without knowing the term and without being operated by the professionals.
yeah.
He came up with his very own responsibility as a coal user. So then I explained him. Then I talked to the headman. We call them Manji, the village head.
Mm.
Then they realized what we're trying to do. And for the time being, we started working on their language. But then again, documentation is a rather new academic discipline, and we didn't have very rigorous or prior training on documentation. So it took us a while to make them familiar with the process and to make them convinced that after our research or after that work, most probably we're going to get a grammar, some improved writing system, and all that. So that's the initial story.
Yeah, so that's I can imagine that that's complicated to explain because, they probably have no idea about the linguistic documentation.
Exactly, exactly.
They think like, what are you talking about? This can't be what you're doing. This is nonsense. Yeah, I imagine that that's where they start from. at the
Mhm.
beginning, it must have taken a lot of repetitions to get them to believe you.
So the very first question was, how would you do that? We don't have a grammar. Just by talking, how would you pull up the grammar out of our conversation? Is it possible? So
Okay,
there
so
were
when
lots of
so
questions of
when you
them.
when they believed you wanted to do it, then they started to not believe that you were able to do it.
Primarily, yes.
Okay. So, by the way, before, because you can now speak Col, is that right? Can you speak Col? Okay. So, perhaps later we'll have a chat. I'll ask you to say hello in Col, but for
Okay.
now, so okay. But you don't speak any other languages of that family, or do you? Any other
I
languages, either of Munda or?
understand a bit Santali
Okay,
and a bit Mundari
okay.
and a bit Chakma.
So, and that's when. How did you come to understand those languages? Is it from your upbringing, your childhood?
Because the Kol language is lexically similar to all these sister languages. They have 60% similar word root.
Okay,
The main difference in their affixation. So if
okay,
you
okay.
really give a close hearing, you understand the basics, of course.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So okay, so you went straight there. It sounds like you weren't told anything about how you should do this. You just went in, and just, I mean, you are you from, are you from Dhaka? Is that where you grew up?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're like a city, a city lad, a city boy,
Yeah.
going to just fresh out of your university,
Yeah.
starting your PhD, going to a small faraway village. It must have felt really foreign. Like the culture must be very different. Like, was it difficult to acclimatize to the culture?
It's quite different. It's quite different. Even the nearest small town, it's 1 hour drive away from that village.
Wow. So everything, even the basics, like the way they eat, like the preparation of food, like the economy. I suppose there must be so many things that it's like you had to learn how to do it a different way.
True, true, true. Like their food habit, their sleeping pattern, their households,
Yeah,
everything. Like they have one segment where their pet cows and chickens, they
yeah,
decide just to the right next door. So
right, right,
that's
yeah,
unique. Their food habit, that's quite,
yeah,
but clothes on the other hand, since they're familiar with the Bengali culture and all that, they know about me. They know where I come from. But for
mm,
me, it was a reverse experience. I had to explore that. I had to adopt with that, and I had to merge with their culture. So yeah.
yeah. So is it unusual for them to see someone from a big city, or do they see that regularly?
It was quite unusual for them. It was quite unusual for them because, as I told, there's a nearby small town. That's
Mm,
their like very far city. That's their modernity. That's their contemporary amenities. So Dhaka is like something big.
mm,
Dhaka is
yeah,
the topmost epitome of civilization to them. Yeah, I
right.
was someone who is coming from the very large city and something like that.
So when you first arrived, you didn't speak Kolo until you learned. You took you some time to learn it. Did you have a language in common with them? Can they speak Bangla, or is there someone that speak, or did you have another language you could use?
Some of them speak Bangla, and I had some language consultant who were part of my research, and they became my research associate and my language teacher. So at first they were being the interpreter to the other people, and actually they were trying to encourage me, you speak that, you ask them the question. So this is how my proficiency and in coal
Like
became
a
much
coach,
more
like a
strong.
personal trainer.
Right, exactly.
Right. Okay. So that's where you started. So, I mean, it must take such a long time. Okay, so the first stage is to tell them who you are and to
Mhm,
convince them that that really is who you are, that
mhm.
you're doing linguistic research and you want to describe their language. Next stage is to actually realize that you're in the wrong place and you're like, they don't speak the right kind of Col here.
Right.
You need to go to another
Right.
place where they speak like the actual Col I'm looking for. And then you need them to believe that you are capable of it,
Yeah.
but then you have to, I guess, do you have, is the next stage, are you learning the language, or are you creating like a small corpus? Because like, I guess you must have to collect this linguistic data in order to figure out what the rules are.
Okay. So after finding the right place and the right people, I started with the basic data collection. And I also tried to connect with people. For instance, I would say I started with like 10 to 15 people, cool people. But in the end, there were 6 people who were my regular informants or respondents because the grammatical question I was asking to many of them, it was just like a gibberish. So we were not communicating, we were not connecting with each other. So when I found that, okay, fine, these are the people that I can work out with, after finalizing those 6 to 8 people, then I came up with my questionnaire and data set, and I have had regular interview sessions with them. So just let me share my documentation process. So documentation is firstly data collection, then data annotation and analysis, and finally the corpus. Corpus will come at the very last stage. So for the first 1 year, I was gradually having regular interviews with cool people with specific questionnaire, Barnard Comrie questionnaire. It deals with phonology, morphology, syntax, sound, words, and sentences.
Oh, so
But
you can use this already existing
yeah,
system. Okay.
that was just the structure, but I had to create questionnaire right from the context where
Mm.
I could get a specific sound. I could use a specific word pair. I had to make them utter a specific sound that I am hearing for the first time that belongs to their phonological data set. So that gradual interview, that was the first thing I was having. So I was recording with them 2 hours in a day. Then I was coming back to my place. Then I was listening to the data. I was transcribing them. I was, excuse me, annotating them with ELAN. Then in the next day, right before starting another session, I have had my filler session. What were you saying? What was that word again? How do you say that? How can you say the sentence in different format? So this is how my first year went through. 3 days of interviewing and 3 days of filler sessions with them. So after 1 year, I had a very basic understanding of some vowel and consonant based inventory, some basic word construction structure, and some operational syntactic or sentence structure. Then, when I have had the basic structure or understanding of the sentences and the other apparatus, then I moved into the deeper sections. So yes, the
Okay.
first year was very monotonous. It was repetitive, but luckily the people who were giving me their language information, they were very kind and they were very generous to spend their time with me.
So how long would you spend there? Because presumably you must spend at least a few weeks at a time. How long would you spend there at one time?
Well, I had to spend 2 months in a row. Then I had
Okay.
to come back to Dhaka. I had to get my supplies. I had to have some meetings with my supervisors. Then after spending 1 or 2 months, then I was heading back to their village again.
Because this, I mean, I imagine this is kind of, you go out there, but you have your own family in Dhaka, or like, you got your own things. I know you have a
Mhm.
young child, which I imagine that comes after you finish this field work, presumably. But so
Yeah.
if you have a child, that's even more so. But if it must be difficult to be away from your family for months at a time in a very unusual environment.
Well, true that. And um, my PhD journey has been really hectic because I started in 2000. Started my fieldwork in 2000, mid of 2018, and COVID hit in 2020.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you were
So
in that.
yeah,
Wait, were
yeah,
you still visiting the village during the COVID time?
no, there was lockdown and all that. So my work that was locked for 1.5 year. I started
Oh,
again in 2021, mid of 2021.
wow. Okay, maybe only analysis. You could just do analysis, but then yeah, that must
Yeah,
have slowed you
that's
down.
that's what I was doing, and like there was lack of internet access to them because that area, that still you won't get proper internet in that area. So there's no
Mm.
way that you can connect through online and continue your work. So yes, there's a total pause for 1.5 years.
So you had these 6 or 8 people that you were, the technical terms, informants. So people who were telling you answers to your questions about the language or speaking to you in the language.
Mhm.
What was the demographic like? Because I imagine, let's say, if every single informant you had was male, you might
Mm.
miss grammar specific to, because I mean, it varies by language, but like
Yes.
for example, in Polish, there are certain changes in grammatical ways you have to speak, whether you are a
Yeah.
man or a woman.
Yeah.
So in the Polish past tense, men or like, yeah, in Polish past tense, the past tense goes by gender as well as number and person. So like you may not observe that specific detail if everyone you speak to is a man.
No, I have
Yeah.
had this thing in my mind. Yes, coal also have some specific gender marker. In pronoun, the female have different honorifics and the male have different honorifics.
Mm.
Even the verb inflection, they change with their gender.
Yeah.
So in my respondent list, there were 4 male and 4 female, and
Mm.
the age group was from 20 to 50. So I
Okay.
tried to cover all the age groups along with the gender ratio in a balanced way. Apart from that, these were my main consultants. But when it comes to the oral history or folk tales or storytelling, I also collected stories and oral history from the elder people.
Yeah.
So elder people, you mean like 70 plus, 80 plus. So those who were remaining out there. So I took the very old ancient stories from those people. And those people were really hard to engage. Number one, age. Number two, the communication. So I had to take another coal person as the interpreter. So there was a three-way communication. I was telling the interpreter guy, the interpreter person was telling them, the elder people, he was telling something his own language. Then the interpreter was reinterpreting in Bangla. So there was lots of tragic phase. It took me a while to adjust with all this situation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've seen in a lot of other linguistic communities, the elders have particularly valuable knowledge a lot of the time. It's great that you could get some oral literature from those elder people as well. Right. So then so this was, so hang on, you started in 2018. So 2019, you started your second year of it. And what's, once you've done these questionnaires, once you've confirmed your answers from the questionnaires, once you have the basic phonetics and some of the phonology
Mm.
down, and also some word formation, what happens next?
Okay, then I went to after COVID from mid 2021. I started with the morphosyntactic connectivity.
So that's how. So syntax is sentence structure, and morphology is kind of like word structure, kind of
The
like
connectivity in between the word and morphophonology, how sounds are changing with the sound change and the word
yeah,
changes. Apart
essentially
from that,
grammar. Essentially,
essentially grammar, exactly. So I was diving into the deeper grammar,
yeah.
which was specifically for my dissertation.
Okay.
And also, I was trying to figure out their semantic domain, like the way of their language use, in which field they use their language. I was
What do you
trying
mean
to
by
classify.
semantic domain?
Well, you have the word list. So
Mm,
you're trying to put those words in certain meaning based section, like these are animals, these are plant,
mm.
these are work, these are animate, these are non animate.
Is
This
this
kind.
for lexicon? Is this like for dictionary building?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So you're working on basically grammar and like making the grammar and making the dictionary. So in the end, how long did your PhD last?
I completed my field work at the end of 2022,
Okay. Um, and so, but you started your PhD in it was late 2018 or like mid
late
2018?
2018, right?
Yeah. So this is like a 4 years.
Yes.
And what? So and the result was now you have the grammar. You have in your dissertation, you have the
Yes.
grammar which
I have a
contains the
basic
morphosyntax, honorifics and registers and things, and
okay.
then the lexicon. How much lexicon could you put together in that time?
So I have had 3,000 words
Okay.
throughout the from the beginning to the very end of my fieldwork. I collected 3,000 words.
Okay. So having done this project, are you still are you continuing to work on Col now?
Yes.
Okay. So you want what's your aim, you spend this 4 years, you have some initial documentation. Are you continuing to document it? Like what's your aim? What are you aiming for in the later documentation?
Well, once I have had my dissertation, I realized that's only the beginning.
Mm,
Because if I want to let them know about their grammar, my direct dissertation will not directly help. So
mm.
there is this very thin line of being a linguist and being an activist. So I was trying to connect with the people whom I was working with, and we are writing a very plain grammar written in Bangla, a cool
Mm.
grammar written in Bangla. And we're trying to publish it. Probably it's going to be published in the next year. We plan to provide all the families at least one grammar book.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's
So
so
that's our
good.
initial, and I'm trying to crowdfund something. But um, if things go well, the basic Bangla written cool grammar book will be um, all over the village. Number one.
So do you have an active crowdfunding campaign?
No, I'm just trying to connect with people, some old personal self-funding and all that. So I haven't.
When you open it, tell me. I'll back your project. I'll
Great,
contribute.
great. And second thing, I also applied for a small grant at
Mm,
ELDP. So I
okay.
got the funding, small grant. ELDP.
Mm,
ELDP is focusing on visual narrative of coal. So I just have completed that project because due to the political unrest in 2024, my project was in hold. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
just have
yeah.
visual narrative was all about the art, craft, the gaming, and the insane storytelling of the cool people.
Mm,
I have now in my field work, I'm mostly reliant on the sound and some small amount of video recording. But
mm,
the last ELDP project, it covered almost 20 hours of visual documentation along
mm.
with annotation and all that. So that's another big leap for the cool language database. I have it like small scale corpus that will be open for all. And thirdly, we are trying to create a portal or a database that will be operated by the community people by themselves. See,
In order to make a corpus, or like, what's the purpose of the
yes,
portal?
it's a crowd connected corpus where the community people will provide their language input to that corpus.
Right. Yeah,
So
I see. Yeah,
community driven corpus, that's our current plan. And we have
yeah.
created a portal. We had some initial plat. So from all the communities, there are at least 4 or 5 young educated people. They're much more techy. They're familiar with all this technology, internet and all that stuff.
Mm,
What they lack, they have their language, which is not really intact. What they can do, they can just go to their place, they can connect their people, and they can provide some language input, like they can input words, they can input sentence, they can even put a recording to that
mm.
portal. So that's our current plan. So we're trying to create a local language portal which will be maintained or managed by the community. That's the
So
next.
you said what they lack is I don't remember exactly your wording. What they lack is the completeness of their language. Do you mean that these more educated Kol
Mm,
people tend to be worse speakers of Kol?
yes, once they're urbanized, they're living in the city.
Mm,
In most of the cases, they say, okay, I can't recall that word in my language.
right.
So they're losing their language.
Yeah.
So in that case, they need to be the bridge in between the fluent language speakers
Yeah.
and the community member.
So it sounds like you have some willing either volunteers or collaborators that you found in the Col community. Is that so? I mean, but it's already been since 2018 that you started. So was that something you found when you first arrived, or is that something that's grown over time? The interest of the Col people in their own language.
It's grown over time. I have helped with them with some multimedia phone. I introduced them with YouTube, Facebook channels. So some of those people, some young generation, they're much more familiar with all these online activities, and they intend to promote their language through this kind of stuffs.
Yeah,
That's
it's when you said that you're providing each family with a grammar book of Col, I think that's just, I find this beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to
Thank you
do.
very much.
It's
Thanks very
really
much.
beautiful because you know how common it is for a
Mhm.
linguist to describe a language and then leave and never come back. And
Exactly.
not only leave and never come back, but actually not respond to emails, right? So there's like people like we had a previous recording about Laz, right? So the Laz community, there's a I we actually I think met Okan Dale as well because it was at Higa as well. But anyway, the guy Okan Dale who sort of I know who's an activist of Laz, he writes emails to linguists saying like, "You worked on Laz, I have a question," kind of thing. And like quite a lot of them ignore him. Like some of them respond, but some of them just don't want to respond. And it's a real shame because this community has kind of helped essentially what this results in is the
Mhm.
community helped a linguist in basically in their career, and the linguist has
Right.
kind of used this community to push their career forward and not help the community.
Mhm.
I think it's really great how you're going to get you know even if like, I know this sounds stupid, but even if nobody reads it, it's like a beautiful thing to have in your home. Your
Yeah.
language, you're 3,000 people only, and in your home you have like this symbol of your language basically in the form of this book. Hopefully people will use it and read it, like not use it, but even if they don't, it already is beautiful just as a symbol. So I'm really glad that you, and also doing these other things with the community, I'm really glad that you are involved in that way.
It's my pleasure. I thought it was my responsibility to work with them because they have taught me their language, and like I have earned my degree and all that. So what's the point of doing that research if my research, it doesn't add any value to that language? So that's what came to my mind, and that's why I'm working on that. And I have had this argument with my other linguist friend. They were saying, okay, there's this thin line between a linguist and an activist. You can't be a linguist and activist at the same time, but we don't need to see in that way. So if you're writing a dissertation, it's quite an easy task to convert your dissertation into a plain grammar and provide those grammar to the people. And as you have said, maybe a very few people will use it, but if some people use that, that's the most outcome that can provide. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you very much
Well,
for the appreciation.
you should never, I think it's important not to underestimate the
Mhm.
importance of prestige and the importance of awareness. So
Mhm.
when you are giving people a book about coal, this is probably, I mean, I haven't asked you any questions yet about literacy and and schooling and stuff in the coal community, but you know, a book about coal is something they maybe never imagined before. They never, I don't know,
Mhm.
I have to ask you this question really, or how they feel, but in some communities, it's sometimes the case that there's either no book, like it's hard for them to imagine because their language is not normally written. So for there to be a book about their language, they're like, wow, my language can have a book. It brings them to this realization that of the value of their language and their heritage, which
Exactly.
otherwise they might think, oh, it's just who cares? It's just who cares about
Yeah.
this language, right? But if they see and this is a book about your language, they
Mhm.
can have a new view on the prestige of the language, and also just an awareness. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't realize. Sometimes people are like, I didn't realize we have our language is
Mhm.
different to other languages or something. Like, I think that has its own power, even if again, there's so much power to what you're doing, even outside of whether people like, even before they open the book, like there's so much power to this gesture and this thing that you're doing for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then in terms of the line between a linguist and an activist,
Hmm.
I think it's a definitional line, but there's no rule about it. It's
Yeah.
like somebody
True
could
that.
be could be a political scientist and be a
Hmm.
politician at a political scientist meaning they could study things like various political events. They could study revolutions, they could study elections, they could study like political parties.
Yeah.
That's the job of a political scientist, and at the same time they could be a politician.
On
There's no
field.
reason they can't be.
There's no prohibition. Right.
It's just if they achieve something as a politician, like if they become elected, then it doesn't mean that makes them a better political science. It doesn't mean they go and say like, look, I got elected, that's why you should give me a PhD in political science, right? That doesn't work that way. Same way here. Like if you encourage lots of people to
Mhm.
speak call, that doesn't mean that you get like to publish. Well, I mean, maybe there are conditions where you might, but usually it's not like because you encourage people to speak call, therefore you get to publish in an academic journal that like I've got people to speak call. Like that, they're different roles. They're different roles, but there's no reason that one person can't do both. It's just your personal choice to do both. But I
Exactly.
do like
It's
the
just the will
idea
to
that,
act.
yeah, yeah, I do like the idea that, when you build this relationship with the community, you're like, well, as you're saying, it's a very beautiful thing to say, like, I have a responsibility to them now. Like, I don't want to disappear from their world completely now.
Hmm.
Like, I need to, like, continue some kind of thing for them. Like, yeah, I really appreciate this sentiment or this, like, action that you're taking.
Thank you very much.
So there's Kol, and then there's, as you say, there are 50 languages roughly, 45 or 50 in Bangladesh.
Mhm.
Do you think in future you will have involvement with other languages in Bangladesh, or do you think the Kol is going to be basically your only concern?
Well, see, from the understanding of language and the connectivity with people, I have the
Mm,
close affinity with coal. So
mm,
my expertise, my contribution, if I say, this will be directly associated with the coal people. But
yeah,
that's a very small chunk of the big picture. So the local portal that I was talking about earlier, where
yeah,
interested community people they can contribute in that portal. We are trying to create a common platform for all the indigenous communities or the language users of Bangladesh. They
mm,
can come together. There
mm,
shouldn't be any specific distinction between plainland or hillside. So they have their own linguistic demand, they have their own linguistic background. But when it comes to the point of linguistic citizenship, linguistic right, they are on the same page. So what? Uh, Along with some other friends from different communities and some other linguists, we are trying to form a platform where all the voices from different language communities, they will be talking about their necessity, their language revitalization need, their language education need. So, yes, goal is not the end goal. My intention with all other linguists and all other community members, we want to become the voice for all the indigenous communities or all the indigenous languages in Bangladesh. So, yes, we're trying to collaborate with other people from hillside, from plainland, from along with linguists, along with anthropologists, along with language activists. So that platform that we're trying to work on.
Well, it seems to me that with your knowledge of Kol, but your experience of handling Kol and handling this
Mhm.
case of nobody's done it before, what do we do? It's a valuable experience to share with others. I mean, I'm sure there are other young linguists
Mhm.
in Bangladesh who,
Mm.
they are in a similar position that I want to work on this language. There's very little on this language. I have to go in
Yes,
there and do something. And then they can talk to you and you can say, listen, step one, step two, step three. You can outline for them like what the process is. I mean, that would be much better
right.
than your position where you started from almost nothing and you're like, I don't even know what I have to do.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to tell you that. So we have introduced in our department, we have linguistics department at Dhaka University. There's a course called Indigenous Language Studies. So along
Mm,
with our senior professor, his name is Professor Shoro. So we initiated field trip for all our master students, and for the last 2 years we are bringing our 40 to 50 students to different regions, and we're trying to provide them a very basic idea about how language documentation, grammar, sketching work. They are going to field work, they're collecting data, and they're now a bit familiar about how the language situation is, how does language documentation will help to overcome this situation. And a few of them, they're becoming passionate about language documentation. They're trying to pursue their career. Trying to pursue higher studies on language documentation. So yes, scenarios are changing for the last 2, 3 years
Mm,
from the
that's really
academic point
interesting.
of view as well.
Yeah. So also just I mean obviously recently and there's been a lot of news in the last maybe 5 years on Bangladeshi politics. Was not a we're not it's not politics podcast here. I don't want to get in deep into the politics, but I understand there's been, much upheaval in recent years. So
Mm.
perhaps that may have affected the government's view on minority languages and so on. Um, is there could you speak a little bit to like what the government in Bangladesh what is in the past and in currently now has been
Okay.
the approach of the
Okay.
government to these languages?
Well, to be honest, we have a newly elected government right now after that July uprising in 24. But long before that, for the last 10 to 20 years, no government is really what is the politically correct word, cordial about any minority language.
Yeah.
So the people who are a community, they wanted to be called as indigenous,
Mm,
but the Bangladeshi government, they didn't approve the term indigenous. They have introduced a term which is known as small ethnic group, which is
okay.
not really uh, accepted by the community members. And to work on language, they have introduced the mother tongue based multilingual education,
Mm,
but that's on the very primary or initial stage. There is no teaching aid material on those language. There are no teacher training. There are no proper learning material. There is no corpus. So for the last 10 to 20 years, there is a very minor support from the government, and the people, they're trying to connect with the government, but unfortunately there are different regimes, but no other regimes has truly supported this documentation or the education in this community. So yes, this is kind of um, it's an odd situation from the authority or the state.
so
There's
yeah.
no direct support, long story short.
Yeah, basically, I see what you mean. So, but it seems from your description that the Kol people or some Kol people anyway, have become more interested in their language. I mean, did they previously? Are there any people in the Kol community who are kind of? I want to get a sense of the vibe. Like, I want to get a sense of are there people saying, "Oh, we should forget about Kol because it's nobody care like it's a provincial language," or is that it doesn't from your description? It doesn't sound like most people think like that. It sounds like most people think this is our language, and some people actually starting to be proud of it. I wanted to get a sense of the vibe of that, but also how this translates into other. I mean, obviously, there's many, so it's difficult to say for everybody. But in general, in Bangladesh, is this something that many different linguistic communities or like languages experience that people are aware and they have do they have a degree of I mean
Right.
one thing I do know about is Silheti. So I mean not that I know a lot about Silheti, but in London there are a lot of Silhetis. A lot of the Bangladeshi people who live in London are Silhetis, and they have a
Yeah.
sense of pride about Silheti. There's a university
Yeah.
organization in I think it might be SOAS, but it might be UCL. Anyway, one of the universities in London has like a specific
Mhm.
Silheti organization, and they work on teaching Silheti and so on. So they have a lot of kind of pride in Silheti. Um, and I just kind of wanted to get a sense as like what's the
Okay.
sense in Bangladesh of people towards their own languages?
Okay. So firstly, Sylheti, for those who are living in Sylhet region, they have their very own linguistic pride. Some also say that Sylhet, people from Sylhet, they often claim that, okay, this is not a dialect of Bangla. Sylheti is a different language. So they're very proud of their language. But for the indigenous languages in Bangladesh or the community languages in Bangladesh, scenario is quite different. As you were saying about Kol, like Kol people are getting involved in language uprising and all that, because as I said, Kol, the as I said, there are 3,000, almost 3,000. So in that village, there are 2,000 Kol people. So the village is very consolidated. They
Mm,
have their language use domains in between
mm,
family, in between friends, in between social structure. That's why they're proud of their language. But that's not the case for the other community. Sister languages like Kol, Koda, Kora, Mundari, or Khiang, Khumi, Bom, they're losing their language. And they are saying that, okay, fine, if I'm not getting any job, if I'm not getting proper education, it's better to leave my language and shift to Bangla. Other communities which are not consolidated, who are marginalized among the communities, they're losing interest in their own language. And that's happening in many other communities. At least 10 to 15 communities, they're gradually losing their language just because of that um, loss of their interest in language. Because, um, as I said, some communities are marginalized from the marginalized. For instance, uh, around the Kol village, there are many Santali people. For Chakma and Tonchonga, these two language, Chakma is minority language among the minorities.
mm,
So either they are trying to connect with the dominant community language or into Bangla.
mm.
So their language is really endangered. The next generation or the infants, they're not really learning their language. So yes, that's a
So,
matter of
so
fact.
Col is like an interesting case because they're so
This is
consolidated.
an
Yeah, it means that they
yes,
actually almost don't have outsiders to tell them to
true
tell them
that.
that the language is bad
Yeah,
somehow. Like nobody's there saying like your silly language, like because there's just no one else there but the Col people.
yeah,
So I guess that's very
true
different.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Interesting.
and that's the
So
only
yeah,
village in Bangladesh where Kol people
yeah,
live. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, final couple of things I wanted to ask about are basically connected things. Is about partly about education, so like the Col community and schooling and so on, and whether that's what language is used and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But also about writing. So I understand that during your documentation, you must possibly have come up with an actual writing system for them. I don't know if you did that. Did you create a writing system for Col,
No, not really,
or there was one
because
already
I
before?
have there's already before. So Cole had a primer. Cole had a primer development by one organization. You must have heard about the SIL, Summer Institute of Language,
Yes.
SIL.
Yeah. SIL. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a one segment of Cole people who are being converted into Christianism, and the Bible is being translated in Cole. For
Yeah.
that reason, they adopted Roman alphabet to write coal, but in some Austroasiatic language, they have some very
Yeah.
specific sound like glottal stop. There is a sound called da, and there's another sound called da.
Mm,
So to remark, or there's a specific vowel, there's some schwa like agu. So to identify those specific sound which are not presented in Roman alphabet, they have used some specific marker or diacritic. And from non-governmental level, they have created that very basic primer for a very few people. So um, they have only like 10 to 15 people who start their education from those MTB Emily school, but eventually they go back to regular government school, which is like uh, 10 to 12 kilometers away from that village. Things or subjects are taught in Bangla, and eventually they really don't excel in their studies because the medium of instruction is Bangla.
mm,
After their primary schooling, or in most likely cases, after finishing standard 12, that's the end of their study. So for writing, very few write. they are either using Bangla alphabet or the Romanized version, and their schooling is based on the traditional Bangla medium based schooling or college system. A very
So,
few, a very few, if they're very, very enthusiastic, they're very industrious, some of them, they just go to university to get the honors degree. There are very few people, like 2, 3 people have graduated.
okay. So is anybody writing in this language or reading in this language in Kol?
Yes, as I said, they are trying to translate their language. A very few people. The person I was working with, his name is Rajiv Kol. Rajiv Kol, along with his team members, Mongol Kol, they're trying to translate their language in Bangla, and they're trying to write their poems, their stories, either in Bangla form, Bangla writing system, or in the Romanized version. Maybe they're posting this on Facebook, or they're writing on their notebooks. That's the present case. It's very recent. It's not
Okay, so
very
just a little bit
oldest
starting. Yeah.
starting phase.
Okay. All right, great. Just basically to finish up, one thing is you're talking about you got some projects around coal that you're continuing. Is there anything that do you think anybody could do to contribute? If somebody listened to this and they wanted to make some kind of contribution or help somehow, was there anything that you'd recommend for them?
To the audience.
Yeah, to the audience.
Okay. So I would request all the audience, if their small online presence like YouTube videos or some Facebook pages, it's better to connect with them. Even if you don't understand that language, try to be with them to keep them motivated. On that note, they will know that okay, my digital presence matters. So that small digital acknowledgement, that moral, mental, online support, that could really boost something up. For me, it's just a like or a share, but to those people, that's kind of acknowledgement that, okay, my work is being presented to others. So that's the support I would really seek to the other people. So even if you see some pages or some YouTube channel that are promoting the local language, please do support them, either in a financial way or just by supporting them with the cause. That would be great.
Great, that's a good idea. And to finish up, would you be able to give us a few words of call, maybe just introducing yourself? Is
Okay,
it
let
something
me
you can
try.
do? Yeah.
Yeah. Johar. Johar means hello.
Mm.
Inga notum Imtiaz.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Imtiaz.
Mm-hmm.
Kalka menamya. How are you?
Mm-hmm.
Raskagi. So they use lot of gestures and all that. Raskagi means I'm doing well.
Okay.
Inga notum stas. Chalka menamya. That means let's come to our place. We will have some food. That means Ale Dhaka Jomale. Ale Dhaka Jomale. We'll have food and rice.
Great. Nice. Nice. Thanks so much. Okay, thank you so much, Mashrur. Thanks again for coming on. It's been really interesting speaking with you about language documentation and about Kol and the situation of languages in Bangladesh. So thanks again.
Yeah. My pleasure. It was my pleasure to have these words with you, and it means a lot. And if someone is hearing, thanks to the audience as well. And hopefully, we will also get connected throughout this kind of podcast. Thanks for the initiative, and thanks for inviting me here again.
Thanks a lot. So that was it for today. This is Panglot
Yeah.
World Languages, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks for listening to the Panglot World Languages podcast. My company, Panglot Languages, makes learning resources, including language learning apps, for lower resourced languages. Our mission is to make high quality learning resources for as many languages as we can, treating each language and culture with the respect it deserves. We use a combination of linguistics, the science of learning, and our own decades of experience learning and teaching languages to produce highly effective apps and other products to teach exactly the kinds of languages you hear about on this podcast. You can find out more about our work by visiting our website at www.panglotlanguages.com. I hope you have a great day.